All right, so I have made this print ready. I've brought in these different EPS vectors that I'm using for the signature, for the image, and I've made them look the way I want on an 8x10 by 350 pixel per inch. That's our lab standard resolution canvas. And I am going to save it first as a print-ready Photoshop file for me. So this is all based on printing. So when I make something print-ready, I call it PR dash then everything else. And I'm saving it first as a cloud file, so that's a PSDC, a Photoshop document cloud. Now I'm going to say File, Save As, onto my computer as just a regular PSD. And now I'm ready to flatten it and make it what's called an archive format. So far we've done working formats. An archive format is you've done everything, you want it to last and never lose quality, but you also don't need to go back in and work on all the layers. So you want to save memory. So the first thing I do is say Layer, Flatten Image, all the way at the bottom. Exactly as I see it here, white pixels and all are now in the image. Then I go to Save It, File, Save As. Save to your computer so you can change the format type. This is your print-ready version of it. And you're going to save it as a new type of file, and that's called a TIFF, a TIFF file, sometimes just TIF. So scroll down to TIFF. When you hit Save, it's then going to give you the options for TIFF, and this is important. You always want LZW on. So LZW is a lossless compression format. It's the only lossless compression image format, which means it will save you memory without ever losing quality. TIFFs can support multiple layers, but if you try to save a TIFF file with multiple layers, it will ask you if you're sure, because TIFF is usually used for archive formats, and it doesn't make sense to take up the extra memory of multiple layers when it's a final product, right? And I don't want you to take up that extra memory because you don't want the printer to have to spool and process in the middle of printing. So you want the memory file as efficient as possible. And for that reason, we do hardwire printing. We don't do wireless printing. So it's not really an issue, but it also saves space in our class Dropbox. So once you've saved it as a TIFF file, make sure you know where that is. You can always go to Save As and see on your computer where it's putting these things. So it's putting it into my Vonnegut folder. I want to put it into my desktop. As a TIFF, always have LZW checked. And say OK. So there's my TIFF. I'm going to mark that as purple. Now to print it, to send it to the printer, which is this class, what you do is you go to our canvas, you go to the home page, you go to links, which I'm not going to open on this public channel, and that will give you our login and our password for Dropbox, for our class Dropbox. When you go to the Dropbox, I believe I'm already signed in here, yes, this is what you'll see. So you want to go to Digital Art Class Files, and then you want to go to Flatten TIFF Files to Print. And if you're ever unsure about how to make your stuff print ready, within that, where you each have a folder for this semester to put your print files, they should all be flattened TIFF files. It gives you instructions on how to make them print ready, right? There's a PDF that goes through it. Just a one page, very simple. So I'm going to go to my instructor folder, and I'm just going to drag and drop that TIFF right into my folder. These folders are housed on our print computers. So all I have to do, as soon as you do that, it updates, it uploads, and then I print it right from that file. Right? And if you're in digital imaging instead of digital media, I want you to see how I print it. Digital media, you're welcome to see how I print it. But digital imaging, it's actually important for you to see that process. Yes, David?
On the TIFF
TIFFs can also be transparent backgrounds, but I flattened it with the white background. It doesn't actually matter, but make sure if you do the white background, you do it like I did it, where you either fill it with 100% white. You don't ever choose white as the color, right? Otherwise it will print like a slightly off white. But if you open a new Photoshop file with background white, that's not going to be a problem. But I do like to see it that way instead of the checkerboard, so I can see how it looks. This is how it will print. This will be the black mat around it. So now let me show you the exact same thing using assignment 4. So you guys know what to do. So I'm going to open it up. This is my working format, my AI file within Illustrator, right? This is where I left off. No, that's not where I left off. This is the problem with the cloud version as well. I think I need to go to Illustrator. Let's see. Find my most recent. Annoying. So I know I had all of this done. This is a good example of having it saved in 2 places and being better organized than I am. So let me see. So this is when I will search using the semester code and assignment 4. That's the latest one it has. All right. So it did not save the way I wanted it to at the end of last class. So let's say I wanted to use this. All I have to do is turn off my other layers. You don't need to delete them. You just need to turn them off. And then save it as an EPS. So File, Save As, not as a copy, but as. I'm going to save to my computer. I'm not trusting the cloud right now. And then go to EPS. And I'm going to save it to the desktop so I can see it. So let's say this is my finished logo, though clearly I have a ways to go. So now I've got the EPS. I'm going to mark it purple, distinct from the other things I've done. I'm going to open up a new Photoshop file, File New, that is 8 by 10 inches. My logo is slightly wider than it is tall, so I might do 10 by 8 inches. 10 as the width, 8 as the height, by 350 pixels per inch. And now I'm going to show you how you can add color and texture and other effects. Okay, so now this is 8 by 10. It's by 350. I can always check by going to image size. 8 by 10 by 350. And now I drag and drop the EPS file onto the Photoshop. And I can place it as though this is my black mat. This is my visible part of my print showing through the 8 by 10 window on the mat. And there it is. So if I want to save it as that, then that would be my black logo version. But I want to save it to canvas. To save it to canvas, I want to do it as a free-floating black shape. So I don't want a white background. So the background would be turned off and I'd save it as a PNG. But a good logo is clear, engaging, and versatile. It's not very versatile if it's just black, because then if it's on a dark background, you won't be able to see it. So this is how we build more versatility into your black shape logo before we add color. And it's going to teach us how we can add color to it. The important thing is that this is a smart object. It's not rasterized. We leave it that way. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create additional backgrounds. I'm going to duplicate the background twice. This first one I'm going to fill with black. Go to Edit, Fill, choose black. There we go. And you can barely see it on the projector. You can see it a little bit more clearly on my screen. You'll notice that the black of an EPS out of Illustrator is a CMYK black. It's called 100% black in ink. That's not as black as an RGB black, which is the way light is used in Photoshop. And we'll be learning those differences as we get into digital coloring. But basically, blacks are not all the same, right? It depends on how they're printed. And Illustrator is made for printing. So you see that. How can I help that black to show up, that logo to show up? If I double click on the logo, I'll get to my layer for the logo. I'll get to my layer styles. You can add layer styles like a stroke in Photoshop, and you can give that stroke options like a certain width. And unlike Illustrator, you can set the stroke to be on the outside. So this is what we call an offset. It helps you, it's offset from your image, but it helps you see your image more clearly. And I can play with the opacity of it. I'll keep it at 100% opaque and normal, but you can play with all kinds of effects, though I kind of like the textured effects of doing a dissolve, lower opacity stroke that's a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's one way. And then it shows up, right? And then if I turn off the black background and turn on the white background, it looks exactly the same, right? It just makes it more versatile. Now this middle layer, I'm going to fill this with middle gray. This is really to test the versatility of your black shape logo. And you see the offset helps there as well. Now, it does the layer style as an effect that you can turn on and off. We can also add some other options. What if we don't want the stroke? I'll turn that off for now. But what I want is a soft-edged offset. I can do an outer glow. And an outer glow, I can take the opacity down. I can make it cleaner or noisier. I tend to like that noisiness. I can take the size down. I can play with the jitter. And the spread is going to be the actual size, and the size is going to be how soft it gets on that spread. And then, of course, I can play with the opacity as well. So these are some basic offsets. When you do an offset for your black logo, your black shape, I want you to only use white, right? I don't want you to have like a blue tint to it or anything, because we're trying to make a very clean black shape. But that's truly versatile. And so we'll say that. I can even layer them up. So I have the stroke at a higher opacity, and then I have the lower opacity soft-edged one. And you can see how that shows up on the gray as an offset. And then on white, it's going to look the same, because I'm only using white as offsets. Now I turn off all my backgrounds. All those effects are mapped to the smart object, and I'm going to save it first as my finished assignment as a PSD. I'm going to call it a test since this isn't my full logo. And I'm going to call it my black logo. And then save on my computer. And not as a TIFF, but as a Photoshop document, right? To keep all of those effects. That can now be saved as a PNG. So I save it as a copy onto my computer as a PNG.